in this episode of the Carrick podcast.
So many great people live their life chasing success, all for a line on an epitaph, all for a line on a tombstone. Success has costs. You know that.
I do.
Right? Costs of injuries. I've read about your injuries, but there's psychic costs. People try to take us down. As a matter of fact, a symptom of success means you get a lot of critics too.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Carrick podcast. I am your host, current New Jersey Devils defenseman, Carrick. I speak to guests that I really revere and look up to each and every week. I've been so grateful for a lot of the conversations we've had, learned a lot about myself in the process, about our guest, and I hope you have too, wherever you are in the world today. But today in particular, I am very excited to talk to a role model in my life, someone I really look up to as a leader, Sharma. He is a globally respected humanitarian. He is truly a leader amongst leaders, someone that he has written The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, The Greatness Guy, The Leader Who Had No Title. And now we talk a little bit about the most recent book I've read and that he's published, The 5 a.m. Club. He truly is a profound person, filled with wisdom and rhythm. He has a very clear sense of his work ethic, of his superpowers, and of his dark side as a person and as a professional. I'm very excited about our conversation today, and thank you for joining us. I also want to start with, before we get to Robin today, I want to answer the question of why I enjoy having these types of conversations. Robin is someone who's been in the self-help, the personal development, the self-mastery field longer than I've been alive, frankly. His teachings are really time-tested. He consults, both the art and science of well-being and just how to develop oneself. And it's a lot of the work that I like to do on my own. I find it lends itself well to having a more resilient and passionate experience with my hockey career, which, has a lot of ups and downs. But I also have a family life. I have goals for myself outside the rink. We touched on that a lot with, the Zach Hyman podcast, in terms of learning how to holistically grow as a person, really day in, day out in every aspect. And Robin in his work is really been a great source of development influence on me in a positive light. So I'm very excited to share him with you. He's truly a brilliant person. I learned a lot from our conversation today, and I hope you do too. Robin, no, thanks. I'm thrilled to talk to you because I've really become a fan of your work. I casually, I think, come across it just because your reach is so strong. You've done obviously a fabulous job building your career over, how old are you, 55 now?
Yeah.
And I guess I look up to you in a sense that at around 25, you'd made a massive life decision to really invest in how you wanted to build your life, how you wanted to study your life, how you wanted to curate your life. And I guess my path, not similar. I'm not announcing any retirement today. But I really got to a point at 24, 25 where I wasn't happy with how I was handling my career. I became very, I was always a never be satisfied kind of guy. And that was coming a little hot to handle. I was struggling with sort of the mental resiliency to stay even keel, and I was bringing a lot of my career emotions home with me, and dragging my family through the mud of the roller coaster of an NHL season. And I just, wanted to invest in, I guess, my own process so I could be more neutral when I got home. I remember my dad growing up. He's in real estate management, and he'd have tough days at work, and I never knew the difference, as a young man. So I consider you to be, and 15 million books sold worldwide, like obviously one of the world leaders in the study of life. And I'm so excited really to talk to you today.
Well, you're more than generous, Connor. Have you seen the Netflix documentary series, The Last Dance, with Jordan and the Bulls?
I'm watching it right now. Yeah. And being in Chicago where I'm from, it's
Sure.
I think it'd be a sin not to.
Yeah. And when I watch Jordan and when I watch Phil Jackson, who one of the pieces of wisdom he shared is you're only successful at the moment you're successful. So it's, the Bulls win the championship, and then the next day it's the baseline for where they're starting. What I'm trying to say is what you said about, your need to just always be improving and relentlessness. I mean, that's a gift. And what I believe is we have to manage our gifts and honor our gifts, but manage the downsides as well. And so it sounds like, your gift is to always be trying to improve things and get better. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the NHL. You wouldn't be a pro athlete. And yet at the same time, in our personal lives, often the things that make us great at work are challenges in our personal life. And you're right, when I was in my mid-20s, I was a successful lawyer. And I became a lawyer for all the wrong reasons. They said, the society tells us if we get a good income, if we get some nice things, live in a nice house, get social media likes these days, then you're going to wake up in the morning and there's going to be rainbows and puppies and, flowers and rose gardens. And we know that's not true. As a matter of fact, as John Kabat-Zinn, the great Zen teacher, said, wherever you go, there you are. And so I'm a huge fan of success and maximizing your talents and enjoying the things the world has to offer. Why not? And yet, what's more important than what I call JPF, joy, peace, and freedom? And so I left the law. I wrote my first book. I self-published it in a 24-hour copy shop. Started from nothing, was laughed at, ridiculed, and mocked. But step by step, I got the message out there, and it's been an interesting ride.
Well, and I've in doing some further research on you, we confirm we're going to do this podcast. I think I'm on the last chapter of the audiobook. I've managed to get that far in about 7 days, so I'm really enjoying reading, the gift you've given in terms of the 5 a.m. club. But I was reading your mission statement online. And it was to help people and organizations around the world lead without a title. And for me, that's been like, I'm not trying to come on this podcast or even on any social media and coach. I don't want to be a coach. I don't even want to be appointed as, some leader. It's just, I want to start, and I really like with the 5 a.m. club, how comprehensive you are. You talk about the 4 internal pillars, mindset, heart set, health set, and soul set. I'm curious, what was your relationship with those 4, really inner pillars, and how did you differentiate between the 4? Because I personally never really separated soul set and heart set. I kind of viewed them as the same sort of inner peace, like you're talking about. What started to really point you in that direction? What thought really started tugging on your shirt to identify and clarify those 4 areas of work?
Well, first of all, if I may, you say that you don't want to be a coach and leader and all that kind of thing, and I'm on the same page. I mean, I don't want to be a guru, and I don't want to hold myself in the Last Dance. Jordan says, if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have held myself out to be a role model, because in the episode my son and I watched last night, it was episode 6, I think. Mm-hmm. He realized, the world builds you up to tear you down. And he went through that whole, be like Mike, and had all the endorsements, and he was on top of the world. And then before the game with the Knicks, there was so much pressure. He and his dad went out to Atlantic City and gambled, and all of a sudden, they tried to tear him down. And so I think it's an interesting world. I have no interest in being a role model or a guru. I just want to be myself, and I want to be, I'll get to the four interior empires. I just want to say my life changed a few years ago, Connor, when I stood in Nelson Mandela's prison cell on Robben Island. And there was a former ANC prisoner who gave me the tour. And I said, "Did you know Nelson Mandela?" He said, "Yeah, I served with him for 7 years." And I said, "Oh, well, what was he like?" And he said, "Oh, that man was a humble servant." So you have someone as great as Nelson Mandela, whose mission is to serve. And so I think, being a leader and trying to get social media likes and, defining yourself by who you are in the world is a very short game. And I think ultimately life, even the longest life, is a short ride. And I think we're in it to maximize our potential, but also to serve as many people as possible. On the four interior empires, you're right. I mean, this as a mental health activist as well as a pro athlete. But so many people are talking about mindset. Mm-hmm. Right. And here's the messaging we hear. And I'm not judging it as wrong. I'm just saying mindset is everything. Well, with great respect, I don't think mindset is everything, because mindset is our psychology. And of course, we need to be positive thinkers to install the mentalities of winning. But psychology is only one element. I think we have three other interior empires that I've identified in the 5 AM Club. We have mindset, which is your psychology. We have heart set, which is your emotionality. I mean, we are human. We must feel. We feel sorrow. We feel joy. We feel anger. We feel gratitude. So heart set, but that's only two. Third one I identify in the book is health set. I mean, you're a master at that, right? That's our physicality. That is, our energy and our longevity. And then we've got soul set. Now, any of your listeners who might roll their eyes and go, "Okay, come on, Connor, why do you have this person here talking about soul set?" But soul set is actually where warriors play. Soul set is not about metaphysics. You can have a great mindset, great psychology. You can have a great heart set, which is a strong emotionality. You can have a great health set, which you do. But if you don't have your soul set in order, if you're not intimate, not with your egoic self, but your heroic self, you haven't found a cause that's larger than your own life, if you haven't turned down the screaming ego to listen to your best self, then you're never going to be a champion, whether it's in the NHL or in a business or in society or in the world. So I think those four interior empire that's where the real titans play, working on those.
And I think, I do talk to like a lot of young athletes through, this podcast and through social media and things like that. And that is something that I'm trying to root for, is the development as a holistic person, because when I look back over my career, my best play, my quickest access to flow state, like all of those elements are on board. Like, I've never played, I've always played my best hockey with a sense of mission, with a sense of team, when I really felt important to the game. I've never played my best hockey hungover on 2 hours of sleep, whatever. Like I've always, managed that physical element. I've always been kind of a body nerd. So that's just something I've cared about, since I was young. And having that emotional fire, you really do need every leg, to the chair for me, in my own performance. And for me, it's really about balancing that inner ambition and that dark side that Jordan, for example, we keep coming back to this, but, Jordan, I think, had a good relationship with the pros and cons of his, competitive spirit for the most part, and then, Kobe was another guy that people pointed to and saw, the darkness in him in hockey. Like I see, I practice a lot here in the city of Chicago with Patrick Kane, and you see that same sense of like, assassin mentality, just they're cunning, looking for any edge at any time. And it's really something that, I can't really speak to the business world. It's not a game I play in yet, But in the hockey world, those four elements, really do show up in all the greats that I've always tried to emulate.
Yeah, I mean, again, to go back to Jordan, he was being interviewed by Connie Chung. And, in this episode 6, I think, it was just fascinating. She says, she looks at him and she goes, "So, Michael, do you have a gambling problem?" He goes, "I don't have a gambling problem. I can stop right now." He goes, "I have a competition problem." And if you look at the docuseries, again, for anyone who's just watching, it's The Last Dance, but he just couldn't turn off the winning. Even before he got on the court, he was playing and he just wanted to win. On the plane, he would go to the front and people were playing cards and they would say, "Why do you want to play with us for $1?" And he said, "Because I want the feeling of that dollar, your dollar, in my pocket." And you're right. I don't think anyone who's at the top of chess or the NHL or business or science or movement making, every one of those people has a dark side. I mean, the world has been created by wounded people.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we want to do is we want to take that shadow side to give credit to Carl Jung. Let's go as deep as possible here. Almost every A player was never enough for mommy or daddy. And at some level, probably unconsciously, they're trying to say, look at how successful I am in the world, to get that validation they didn't get. If you had a perfect childhood, if you were nurtured and everyone, hey, you're the best there ever was when you're 4 years old, you're not going to have that fire. And I think you're right. You want to use the fire to your advantage, and you want to manage the downsides and the dark sides of it. Otherwise, that's how the addictions happen. And then that's why you see the falls from grace, whether it is the pro athletes who do something that destroys their reputation or their game, or the business leaders who do something incredibly foolish. Someone once said to me at a seminar, "We're only one decision away from stupid."
I mean, I have a good relationship with that ever since, as a kid. I was always very careful, my public image. The conversation and dream growing up in my house was, to achieve a Division I scholarship, and of course, the NHL, and I was coming up as MySpace and Facebook, and these things there was an added level of like permanency to all of our lives as athletes, where all it took was one picture, and I guess on that front, like I was fortunate that my mom and dad, my life growing up was really built around habits. And you talk about the automaticity point in the 5 a.m. club. And that's what I'm trying to, I guess, get in touch with in my own personal life, is more clearly create boundaries around like work and play and self-development and family time, so that there is less distraction, there is less bleeding. And frankly, the big one for me, right, because I am married, I'll be going on 2 years in July, is, I can be obsessive about my craft, and at a point in a family structure that can become, if not scheduled properly, it can become very selfish. And these are all habits that, I guess I didn't realize I needed, in my teens. I didn't have a family, when I was building my career as a young pro. I was living on my own. And it's really been how do I want to say this? A rewarding study of self. Really, it's been very worthwhile. I know sometimes people get uncomfortable with, self-development, but as I proudly identify as a lifelong learner, like nothing brings me more joy than those moments of growth. It's just, I didn't realize until really I got married that I needed to grow as a person.
Well, that's very honest. And I don't understand what's more important than human growth. Often, Connor, when people mock self-help, if you want to call it, or call it personal mastery or elite performance, maybe that's more acceptable. But when they mock it, it's coming from a place of judgment, and underneath that judgment is fear. Because to embrace a new habit, to embrace a new mindset, to embrace a new heart set, to read a new book, to have a conversation that actually disrupts the way you see the world is a terrifying thing to an insecure person. So they'd rather spend their days excusing their lack of materializing their greatness. They'd rather escape into Netflix or video games or being busy versus confront where they've betrayed their own talent. I mean, I think you getting on the path of growth and trying to make yourself into the best athlete and the best husband, perhaps the best father down the road, the best human being you can, that's how you change the world. I mean, if you look at the planet right now, we're in this mess because there was too much greed. We're in this mess because we forgot about Mother Nature. We're in this mess because we forgot we're all brothers and sisters on a tiny planet. We're in this mess because we became more interested in materialism than self-mastery and decency and making the world a better place. And if we would go within and again, this is not metaphysical. I mean, if you would simply read the right books, install the right habits, learn how to build your mindset, build your heart set, build your health set, build your soul set, so you can maximize not only your peace, we're also talking about your performance. Maximize your impact, maximize your creativity, maximize your productivity. Well, when you do that, you start to own your original glory. And you start to fall in love with who you are, and you feel good about yourself. Well, then you go out in the world and you treat people better. You do amazing work, and you deliver value for your customers or your stakeholders. And you tread the earth more lightly because you're awake to what the world is. And that makes you a warrior, and it makes you a great performer. It also makes you a much happier, healthier human being. So I think the door, we've got a little, I'm not saying from a place of judgment. I'm a flawed person myself, and I'm just trying to figure it out as best as I can. But we've fallen into the seduction that the doorway to success opens outward versus inward. And I think part of this time we're experiencing is we get to be alone with ourselves more. Guess what? So you have to confront who you are. Maybe the people you've hurt. Maybe the beliefs that are scaring you. There's a lot of people right now who are terrified. Well, is it the world that's terrifying people right now, or is it their pre-existing fears that what's happening in the world now is activating, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's something I even did, when I, the first couple of days of, there was a little bit of shock, just the season had stopped. I'd never experienced this in my career, hopefully not again. But was dealing with, how many times how common is the conversation in today, the modern person's head of, if I had the time, I would, or I would start, or I would begin, or I would do more of. And I'm one of those people. I was one of those people. I wanted to start a podcast. It was something I wanted to talk about. I love talking to very interesting and worldly and profound people like yourself. These were conversations I want to engage in, a little bit different than what we talk about in the locker room and that. And all of a sudden it was like, 3 or 4 days had gone by. And again, this is something I thought about even with last summer. And I told myself enough excuses during the season why I wouldn't start. But when quarantine started, I really had to stare at myself in the mirror and deal with some of that self-sabotage. It was like, oh, you would if you would start the podcast if you weren't playing? Well, let's see, because 2 days have gone by, 3 days have gone by, and all of a sudden there was this, I had to address, some of the self-sabotage. I had to address some of why haven't you started? A lot of it was fear of judgment. A lot of it was inertia. I think that's a funny force, and a lot of, particularly in hockey, I've got these long built career habits in my career of hard work. And, my system is very automated. I can even be a little fatigued or burnt out in the middle of January on game 60 or whatever. And a lot of people wouldn't even be able to tell. I know, because I know, the fire I come to work with every day and when it's kind of, faltering or not, or I'm not doing the work to recharge. But I had to stare in the mirror and deal with the whole if game that I'd played for a long time.
Yeah. And anyone who's pursuing their dreams and doing something amazing in the world is going to get those people who laugh at them. Because you said you were wondering why you might not have started those first few days. And I think you're right. We all, we're tribal fundamentally and neurobiologically. Thousands of years ago, if we strayed from the herd, we would be eaten by saber-toothed tigers, warring tribes, or die of starvation. So now, here we are in the modern age, we have this neurobiological instinct to fit in. But you can do amazing things or you can fit in. You don't get to do both. As I say in the 5am Club, to have the results only 5% of the population has, we've got to be willing to think, behave, perform, do like only 5% of the population is willing to do. That's going to make us abnormal. So, let's create a word on Connor Carrick podcast. Abnormalist. Let's be abnormalists, because if you look at Tim Berners-Lee, who came up with the internet, you look at Elon Musk, you look at Shakespeare, you look at Jordan, you look at Miles Davis, you look at Mother Teresa. These were all people who said, you know what, I'm going to face resistance. People are going to laugh at me. They might even try to kill me if you really play the game like at the highest level, like MLK and Gandhi. Well, they killed Gandhi because every visionary is ridiculed before they're revered. So I think, for you, me, everyone listening, we've got to have the bravery and the leadership to trust our instinct more than the fear that says, what would people think? Otherwise, you're right. We're going to get to the last hour for our last day and say, well, I cared what people thought. I didn't do my life. And that's a great way to waste your whole life.
That's a lot of how my instinct and my highest self talks to me. It's almost like an impatient child, tugging on mom and dad's shirt. That's how I did with mom and dad when I was a kid at the rink, asking for more money, more quarters for the game room. Hey dad, can I get another dollar? Can I get another? And that's how, it's kind of like a flicker, like a pilot light when I have an idea that I know I'm not paying enough attention to, or there's a part of me that knows it's time to level up and I haven't done so. It just keeps tugging at my shirt and it's like, hey, I'm here when you're ready. And, I've been really excited about the podcast. It's been really rewarding to engage with, people like yourself, your work. And I've talked to some former teammates and gotten insight into their life that, I otherwise wouldn't have. And really it's kind of re-engaging with that curiosity I had as a kid. In the first couple of days with quarantine, I went outside and I was rollerblading kind of old school. I haven't rollerbladed in 10 years, but I was trying to simulate skill work the best I could. And I found myself, I was doing sets and reps around these certain cones. And I was like, this is not true skill development. This is way too structured. This is how adults try to develop. When was my athletic career really built? It was as a kid, when I would just imagine. I would go into these scenarios and pretend and play and have this curiosity instead of trying to have a checklist, instead of trying to, tap the ball up in the air 100 times. It was just, how many can I do? And, I've really had a chance to re-engage with that longer format, taking things from, finite to more infinite style games in my head. And it's been a lot of fun, really. And it's something that I'm grateful for. I don't think I ever would have looked at my routine the same if we hadn't had, the stop in the career. I probably would have kept on, with the same pattern loop I developed.
So isn't it interesting? So many people are judging what's happening as bad. And look, my heart feels for, in the US alone, in 7 weeks, 33 million people have lost their job. Worldwide, people are suffering. People have died, obviously. Remember those scenes of the coffins in Italy. Mm-hmm. So it's a time of great suffering on the planet. And if we're sensitive, caring human beings, we feel that. Having said that, it's also a time where we're reconnecting to important truths. And we're getting to look at our life, like you said, where we can actually step back and say, How am I living? What's most important? What's my pilot light, to use your words? And by the way, I'm sure there's many books in you. That's a good book title. The Pilot Light.
I'm gonna write it down right now.
There's your book title, Connor.
Sharma told me Pilot Light. Done.
I love that. Like, come on, it's poetic. It's the pilot light. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of art. And Picasso once said it took me 4 years to learn how to paint like Raphael. It took me a lifetime to remember how to paint like a child. And here's what I'm trying to suggest. You're right. It's when we don't need to transform into someone we're not. We need to remember who we are before the world beat the curiosity, the creativity, the pilot light, the ingenuity, the audacity out of us. I think that's an important distinction. We're not broken. We just have forgotten who we truly are. And so, us remembering our original nature. We used to be dreamers. We wanted to be NHL players when we were kids, and astronauts and poets and whatever. And then the world says, live in a box, be like everyone else, be average. And what starts to happen is over time, we forget who we are, and we actually believe that we get hypnotized by the messaging of the world. And, I think our lives begin to change when we trust our instinct more than our intellect. Habits are important. The 5 AM is very much about the habits. There's a model in there, the 10 rituals of daily genius. A lot of it's based on neuroscience. The 20-20-20 formula I talk about in the book, you mentioned Dion Phaneuf being a fan. And there's so many athletes who are reading the 5 AM Club. Even I heard the Miami Heat are big fans. So the thing about habits is they're incredibly important. But may our habits become our servants, not our masters. And so I don't think we spend enough time, Connor, talking about freedom from habits, because we can become very rigid to the point where we are ruled by our habits. And this is a very delicate dance to stay as members of the 5 AM Club. I've seen from your Instagram posts, you're a big fan of morning routine and your coffee and journaling. So am I. And that's important. But the great artists understand the on-season and the off-season. And in the 5 AM Club, there's that model, the twin cycles of elite performance. And let's go to the science. The greatest athletes, and you know this better than most, they have these intense high excellence cycles, and then they make time to recover. Because recovery is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Otherwise, you get hurt, as you know so well. And all I'm trying to say is, this is where the instinct comes in. Intellect says every single morning I need to do this. Every single day I need to do the 24/7, 365. But we're not human doings. We're human beings. We're not machines. We're sort of poet warriors. And I just want to offer instinct is where the athlete says, I better take a few days off here. So my pilot light gets turned back on. I'm writing this new book. I just did an Instagram live before I came on your podcast. And here's the manuscript of it. When I go in, I'm like you, I go all in.
I love it. Yeah.
It's approximately 700 pages. So last week I did 40 chapters. High excellence cycle, warrior, full on, fasting, up early, hydrating, all that stuff we believe in. This week I gave myself permission not to write a word. And that's the instinct. Well, that's the instinct where it's like, pull back, sleep a little bit more, go mountain biking, hang out with your family, watch some sunsets. I've got a little garden, work on my garden, read some Marcus Aurelius, and then come back next week, born anew, refreshed, with my pilot light on.
Well, it's that relationship with like the micro, the doing the work, the consistency, the having the platforms in place for your genius to show up, right? You don't leave it to chance. You schedule it, you make room for it, you invest in it. But like you've got this, it's to serve your macro mission. And that's what I really respect about, you and your work is I think you have that duality that it's a very old school work ethic. It's a very, grind it out, grit it out. I will be up at, feet on the floor at 5:01, ready to rock. Or, there's kind of the group of people that go the other way where they're just leaving their day to chance. They want to see what they're hungry for. There's a little bit more laissez-faire element to their life. And I love, if you said it's a delicate dance. I think the beauty is that if I can even show people that the dance is going on, like I'm not even telling people how to do it yet. That's different for every individual, right? Like your burnout point might be 6 days of work in a row. It might be 7 weeks. I was talking to, I remember I had an ankle injury, and I was seeing this French osteopath, this guy named Guy Voyer, who's world class at what he does. And he was seeing me at the end of a long teaching day, and one of his mentees was saying, "Yeah, Guy's a freak. He'll work every single day for 6 weeks, and then for 2 weeks he'll do absolutely nothing. He'll do." And that was the first time I ever was like, it's weird. It's amazing how what I'm trying to apply, the in-season, off-season, how it applies across other disciplines. And I finally started to respect the more artful side to this like art and science blend, this like micro, macro, relationship with life that you seem to exemplify.
Well, I hear you. And that is, back to the 5 a.m. Club, that is the model in the book, The Twin Cycles of Elite Performance. And the science actually confirms, it's so counterintuitive. The science actually confirms we get the most done when we build in recovery, strategic recovery versus hustle and grind. There's so much messaging out there, I'll sleep when I'm dead. 3 a.m., the time that warriors get up. Well, look, I've been teaching the 5 a.m. Club for 24 years. I believe it. But there's a whole chapter in the book which is on sleep. Mm-hmm. And so even anyone who wants to be a better athlete, a better performer, a better producer, a happier human being, let's look at the science. The Energy Project has found that the best tennis players really wasn't as much as what they did on the court. It was what they did in between points and how they recovered that made them great. If you look at any great artist or writer, they had these periods of intense writing and creativity, followed, Connor, by periods of intense non-doing. But it was in the non-doing that the next level ideas were incubated. See, society and our ego says, oh, I must be training all the time. I must be working all the time because society says otherwise, feel guilty, you're lazy. I think there's something to be said for resting and strategic laziness. John Lennon, you know what he said? He said, time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. Haruki Murakami, the great Japanese novelist, he said, when I'm not writing the book, that's when I'm writing my next book. So are we playing a short game where your pilot light? I'm trying to encourage you to write your book.
I'll take the nudge.
Your pilot light gets burned out, or are you going to be a Jagger? Are you going to be a Miles Davis? Are you going to be, a Shakespeare? Are you going to be a George? Are you going to play a long game? And if that's the case, then the twin cycles of elite performance are the way to go. And I think it makes you a much happier human being. Someone said, "Oh, Robin, you're always writing. You're always shooting videos. You're always on Instagram. It might look like that." My reply to the DM was, when I work, I really work. And when I don't, I don't.
That's one of the, really lessons in the physical training I've used of late. Like my trainer's name is Ian Mack. He does a great job. And I've worked with him for a couple of years and we're close. And he has this saying where, in terms of the workout or the training session, to be careful with our words, if you put 9 in, you get nothing out of it. If you put 10 in, you get 11. Now that's very much on like the grind it out, the get after it mentality. But our light days would shock a lot of young athletes.
Exactly.
It's so light. It is, and even on a bigger scale, I remember the year I got married, we went on a 2-week honeymoon to Hawaii. Like right in the beginning of August, when training usually gets really hot, the volume's super high, getting ready for training camp, and our training camp I was a part of This when I was going to play in Toronto was always, demanding. So there was a high level of pace expected from day one. And I came back to my workout group after the honeymoon and was cooking. Like, guys looked stuck in the mud. They looked tired. And I kept my foot on the throttle a little bit. I worked out like once every 4 or 5 days on the trip just to remember what it felt like. And so I didn't get too sore and things like that when I came back. But that was like the first really time that I experienced it where, I had that great compensation for putting in the work all summer long. And I took my foot off the gas and then grew, just allowed for that growth to happen.
Yeah, there's a line in the 5 a.m. Club that says growth happens in the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to remember that. You know this so well, but when you go to 9 in training, you're stretching your muscle capacity past the normal. And as you know so well, Connor, if you were to look at the muscle under a microscope, there'd be what's called micro tearing. Then the athlete or the producer recovers through rest, through massage, through cold baths or whatever it is. And the growth happens in the recovery. And that's the twin cycles of elite performance. And so you're right. If all we do is train, if all we do is create, if all we do is produce and go to our edges without the recovery, we actually don't grow the muscle or the capability. So here's a specific example for your viewers, your listeners. I take most Fridays off and I take most summers off, and I've done so for 2 decades. That is where I get my best ideas. On Fridays, I'm doing this for you on a Friday because it's you and you asked me.
Thanks, Rob.
But usually they're what I call my zero device days. I turn off my phone, I put it in a drawer, I'm away from technology, and I'll go to an art gallery. I can't do it now, but I go to an art gallery, or I'd read, or I'd go out on a mountain bike ride, or I'd take a nap. I'm reading this amazing book on Churchill. It's called The Splendid and the Vile. And it was how he navigated World War II. It's amazing. The German bombers are over London and he's out 2 a.m. in his rose garden smoking cigars and drinking brandy. How does he get so brave? But my point is, he did so because he recovered. There's this, the country residence of the Prime Minister of Britain is called Chequers. And he understood the power of getting out there every weekend and inviting his war cabinet and his friends and having these long dinners and then smoking cigars and having brandy. And, they'd be out there till 2 a.m. just chatting. And then he'd go back stronger. And so, I think you're absolutely right. It's a line from the book is, genius without recovery leads to depletion of your assets. And I think, it is a cycle. Let's go back to nature. You've got your fall season of the harvest, and then you go into winter and a hibernation. That's how nature works. And then you have a strong harvest. You've got to have those times of recovery and hibernation and those winter times of our life or of our weeks.
Well, we saw it in The Last Dance. I think Dennis Rodman, when he asked to go to Vegas, had a good relationship on. He got it. He knew something no one else knew.
I think that was one of the best scenes. It's
that's unreal.
He goes, Phil, can I take 24 hours? Okay, you get 24 hours because we knew what he needed. And then, you remember that the clock on the docuseries, it's 24, 25, 26, 33. And then Phil Jackson goes, we had to send someone to get him. They bring him back. For anyone who hasn't seen the docuseries, and then Jordan and everyone's going, okay, we're doing the runs around the gym, and it's we got to do this because Rodman's been out doing whatever he did in Vegas, and all of a sudden from the back, Rodman blows past them, and just is the superstar of the practice. And I think you're right. It happened to you after you're on your honeymoon, and it happens to all of us if we take even a Friday and a weekend off. We must rest and recover to do our greatest work.
It's really interesting to watch Phil Jackson's role in the whole documentary, just so forward thinking for his time. And, if you know his background, I read 11 Rings, it's actually backward. He was borrowing, he wasn't ahead of his times thinking in terms of today. He was, back when he was younger and kind of his worldly sense. And what an interesting guy. I'd love to talk to him sometime. And because I think the way he handled Robin, the way he handled, Jordan's intensity is just brilliant. And what a difference in the times, like for athletes. Like Dennis Rodman, as recognizable as he was, just went hanging out around Las Vegas, one of the most highly populated areas in the world, and people had no idea. It's wild.
Yeah, there is so much learning in that docu-series. Like I said, Phil Jackson saying, we are only successful at the moment we are successful. Imagine if every athlete said, wow, I won last year, but last year's championship performance is this year's baseline. And that's even in business. Businesses fall because they fall in love with their winning formula. Look at Blockbuster, Kodak, I guess Ericsson, BlackBerry. And then what makes a legend is you never fall in love with your winning formula. Let's go back to Jordan or any great athlete or any great artist or any great entrepreneur. They never lose their holy curiosity, to use Einstein's words. They always protect and insulate the white belt mentality. The moment you think you are a master, you've lost your mentality of a master. You've got to always think like a beginner. Train. You mentioned Kobe. He was a world champion, and he still out-practiced everyone around him. His last game, what was it? 62 points?
Yeah.
What does that tell you? Not only about his mindset, his heart set, his health set, his soul set. So I think nothing succeeds like success. And that's why even if you get to be a champion, it's very rare to get a three-peat. Because you fall in love with thinking like a champion versus going, the only time I'm successful when I was holding that Stanley Cup or that NBA trophy. And when you put it down, you're no longer successful, which means you got to dig deep once again.
Well, I think it's, the beauty of the process, and to flip Phil's words on its head, like one of the takeaways that I have from that is you're only a failure at the moment of failure too. Like there's only a brief mistake. And I was a player earlier in my career. I didn't have a post-game routine. I did the pregame stuff. I did the pump up. I had my pregame meal set. I did the big song. I did the visualization practice, the key words to myself. But when you're playing 82 games a year, you need to come down too. The next game starts right after that one ends. And I was a player earlier in my career where, some of the anxiety or the resiliency over previous mistakes I'd be up at 4:30 in the morning thinking about it. And it really took away from, the energy. It really took away from the freshness of coming to the rink sometimes. And that's, I think, just, part of where my respect for the veteran players in our game of the National Hockey League comes from is just their ability to do it year in, year out after all the trials and tribulations. I played with Patrick Marleau as in Toronto. He's got 1,600, whatever, 2 gazillion games played now. He would cold tub in between every period. And I'm sure sports science out there's a million people that think that's great. There's a million people that don't. The only thing that matters is Patrick thought that it was right for him. And just to think after that many years in the NHL, that many cold tubs, he would still do it every single game. And that ability to, whether he was playing well, whether he was playing poorly, to honor his process, to me was so special to witness. And it's I think a key part to he was very consistent as a person, and that really bled well into his play.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, what you're saying almost speaks to the importance of, again, a delicate balance of honoring your process and your routines, but also reinventing yourself. And Isn't that an interesting fulcrum, or running your winning routines like a cold bath between every period for so many years, and yet maybe somehow tearing down the game so you can reinvent it even better. We've been talking about documentaries, and I love documentaries, especially sports documentaries. I mean, there's a great documentary called The Good Son. It's about Ray Boom Boom Mancini, the boxer, and the Iverson documentary, incredible documentary. The Lenny Cook documentary, incredible sports documentary. Um, but one documentary I watched recently, it's about Miles Davis, the jazz great. And one of the things that made him a legend was he disrupted traditional jazz. Remember that? I don't know if you follow Miles Davis, but remember, I think it's Kind of Blue. I think that was one of his seminal albums. And he used to wear, like a lot of jazz people at that time, the custom suit, and he used to drive Ferraris, and then, I mean, he became a legend in that time. Like let's call it domain dominance. Well, the '60s come. It becomes a time of rock, the British invasion, the Stones, the Who, and funk. And guess what he did? He had the bravery to put away the suits and to start wearing leather pants and those cool glasses of, the funk era. Mm-hmm. But also he reinvented his music. And he wrote, he did an album which became the best-selling jazz album, which totally was different from his previous stuff. And it was called Bitches Brew. And then in the '70s, he reinvented himself again. And in the documentary, his son says, my dad never had his old albums at home. And the documentarian says, why not? And he said, my dad wasn't interested in the past. He was always interested in the future. Pretty good lesson for not only athletes, but creatives, entrepreneurs, human beings.
Yeah, and I think that, really stems from the cycle of doing and then removing yourself from the doing so you can evaluate. Like I've never, I do my very best not to like judge my workout in the middle of my workout. Like I'll during my rest sessions, maybe I'll reconsider how I want to periodize things coming forward. Reflect on what I liked about, what I just went through, yay, nay, keep it or toss it. But if you're constantly stuck in routine, I guess I have experience with this, and I'm grateful for it. Is that I've been traded a couple times, so mid-season, to stay with the energy level, to stay competitive, in the National Hockey League is a challenge in its own right. And then when you get traded, there's definitely the social element. You're trying to break into a new tribe and show everybody, that you can bring value to the group, and you're not an oddball in the room kind of thing. All those different, cultural sort of fit in processes, but you are able to, you're forced to kind of reflect on some of your routines and reinvent. And I guess that's a little bit of where I'm at. I'm 26 years old. I'm really excited about the focus I've brought on how I want to live my life. I want to build, the next phase of my life, the next phase of my professional career. And I think it parallels well to my hockey career. I've had a lot of ups and downs. I've had some injuries. I'm proud of where I've gotten to, but I definitely think there's a lot of meat left on that bone in terms of, where I want to get to in terms of NHL impact night in, night out. And I'm grateful you brought that up, because it's something that, I have, I've wrestled with it, and sometimes it's really clarifying to hear, from someone of your success and your status and your age, how long you've been in this game, just how important it is to, both be so immersed in your work, and then cut it off, throw the phone in the drawer and immerse yourself in the other side of the coin, which is the art and the rest.
You have to. I had Usain Bolt's doctor at one of my live events. And he came up to me and he said, Usain Bolt used to say, I rest to let the training take effect. So I think if you want to have like the real game of legends is longevity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's an artist, whether it's a musician, whether it's a professional athlete, it's longevity. And I think it's a pulse, right? You're in, you're out, and unless you do that, you won't own. You'll get hurt, but also your pilot light will go out. You know, and you've got to maintain. Like I know you like to journal. When I write about in my journaling, I write about work. I always put it in quotations because it's not work to me. I don't want to dishonor my love of what I get, what I'm blessed to do by calling it work. I mean, it's joy. It's a chance to express my creativity. It's a sense to serve human beings. And you mentioned at the beginning that my mission to help people lead without a title it continues to evolve. I just want to now help as many people as possible while as long as I get to live, remember who they truly are. Remember their native genius. Remember their ability to achieve incredible things and live a beautiful life. I mean, one of the great sadnesses of the world is society has sold good people a series of beliefs about who we can become. And we've heard it so much and we've been told it so much, we actually believe it to be true. And then, as positive psychologists will tell you, your story shapes your performance.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't believe you can be in the NHL, you're not going to even have the first practice or training session. And if your story is you're not the kind of person who can find great love or great health or great fortune or have great impact or start a great company or do a masterwork that changes the world, if that's your psychological story, then you're not going to invest the hard work and read the books and have the conversations and do what's required to materialize that story. And so we've got to stay fresh, and we've got to, I love my work, but it's not all I do. Like I love Rome.
Mm-hmm.
I like your posts on Instagram. I think I follow 10 people, and I follow you because it's, I'm trying to do your stretching one from the other day.
You know what? Anytime. Yeah. I am, it's interesting. I was, like when Rocky, came out, and he fights the Russian guy. I forget his name right now.
The Dolph Lundgren character.
Yes. Everyone loves Rocky. I love the Russian guy because my theory was like, I love the idea of becoming this machine, of becoming this maxed out. Like there is no space between my physical capacity and my potential. They're one and the same. And I just love the technology of it. I kind of was born in like the sports science, where that era, the tracking tools and things like that have become much better. I love it. So anytime you want to set up shop and talk about, myofascial stretching or whatever, I love that stuff. I can go on for days.
Yeah. I learn a lot from your stretching, and, we also share a love of coffee. I mean, I'm big on coffee as an antioxidant and as a cognitive enhancer and as something good to drink, It's just, I have a new machine, and I've spent 2 months watching YouTube videos to try to get my coffee dialed in, and I finally have it where I want to get it out. But, I think a lot of what we've been talking about, I'm really into biohacking as well. I'm into fasting. I'm into supplementation. And I think that's really important. I also think it's important not only to be a warrior, but to be a poet. And I think that's where the magic happens. If you can be the machine and be the human, then you've got something really special. Now, you could argue with me and say, well, in Last Dance, was Jordan a poet or was he a warrior? Totally a warrior. And I think most people would say he was a machine. He was a warrior. Ultimately, I think you have to. The great thing about life is we get to live life the way we want. Mm-hmm. And what I do is different from what you do. I'm more of an artist. well, I go hard when I go hard, but I don't want to get to the end and say I didn't see the sunset over Trinidad de Monte on the Spanish Steps in Rome. I love my craft. I love serving. I work really hard, but I don't want to get to the end and say I wasn't an amazing father to my two children, Colby and Bianca, who I have a great relationship with. I think success, there's a line in the 5 a.m. Club, success without soulfulness is an empty victory. And that's where I think, wisdom comes in. That's why I love the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. There's a line in there, in The Shortness of Life by Seneca. And he says, so many great people live their life chasing success, all for a line on an epitaph, all for a line on a tombstone. Success has costs. You know that.
I do.
Right? Costs of injuries. I've read about your injuries, but there's psychic costs. People try to take us down. As a matter of fact, a symptom of success means you get a lot of critics too. People try to attack you. People get jealous. A lot of my new book is about the symptoms of greatness as well. People see you. Oh, you must have it easy. They don't see all the things like it's a lot easier when you're anonymous than when you get successful. You look at some of the super famous people. They can't go out of their house. So they've got these golden handcuffs. So I think, success is beautiful. We need to see how far we can go. I think we dishonor ourselves and we dishonor our maker by not seeing how much of our gifts we can capitalize. Having said that, it's a game. At the end, it doesn't come down to how many trophies we have. I think it comes down to what kind of human beings we were and how many people we helped. And if you can connect with your mortality, as depressing as it sounds, it's inspiring because then you go, am I going to live my life in such a way designed to have my name on a hospital wing or for an epitaph? Or I'm going to, because now people are talking about legacy a lot. I wrote a book 22 years ago called Who Will Cry When You Die about legacy. I don't care about legacy now. We'll be dead. Who cares about our legacy? We'll be food for worms. I think it's asking ourselves right now in this quiet time, how, at the end, how will I wished I will have lived? That's the sport of the Titans, I think.
It's amazing. A lot of those Stoic readings. I read the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and they're little one-pagers, super easy to stay consistent with. But I have the same book now, and I'm going on year 2, and I made notes the first time around, and it is both beautiful as a sign just of how tried and true some of these thoughts and problems that human beings deal and wrestle with. Is like, one, how old these teachings are and yet how applicable they are. And then just in my own personal life, I have exactly a little footprint on where I was a year ago and how I related to the text at hand. And it's been pretty humbling. There's a couple times where I'm like, I'm dealing with the same shit today. I'm dealing with, my work ethic or my, negativity bias or my self-talk or whatever. The same way I was a year ago. And I've got all these processes to try and make sure I'm being better. And it kind of brings me back to earth when sometimes I, see where I was a year ago. And on the other side, I do see just how far I've come on other areas. But it's, I don't know, the Stoicism philosophy is really something that I get a lot from in my own personal life.
Well, you're human. And guess what? I'm dealing with the same things I was dealing with too. But am I where I want to be? Absolutely not. Am I farther than I was? I absolutely am. And that's a really important point you mentioned, which is we think we do personal development work. meditate, we journal, we listen to podcasts, we do courses, we listen to audiobooks, we read books, we pray, we work with healers. I've done sweat lodges. And then you wake up and all of a sudden you're into negative thinking, or there's some pain in your heart set, or you're having a bad day and you go, oh, I've done all this work and I'm still where I am. But that's just the ego, isn't it?
Mm.
Because, we're not where we are. Every meditation counts. Every journaling session rescripts who we are. Every conversation with an interesting person leaves us better than we found that conversation. It's the micro wins that over time, and there's a line in the book, small, daily, seemingly insignificant improvements over time, when practiced consistently over time, lead to stunning results. Small, daily, seemingly insignificant improvements, when done consistently over time, lead to stunning results. And so we do grow. But will we ever get to a place where we're perfect? No, because we're human.
Well, and Robin, I learned a lot today. I'm super grateful that you came on. I was really excited, when you agreed to it. I'm a big fan of your work, but we are still on quarantine here, with COVID-19 and that. And, like you mentioned earlier, a huge blend of gratitude for noticing maybe what I had noticed before about myself and my family. I've definitely experienced some grief just in knowing there's there's a big wave of negative momentum in a lot of people's life right now that I'm rooting for them to be able to manage and reshape and pivot in their personal and professional life. What is something in the world right now that if for our listener, just a piece of advice, maybe I call it like a thought that's been lighting you on fire lately, just something that in the heart has been a thought or an emotion that you keep coming back to, that you can share with our listener today?
I'll offer you a piece of philosophy, and then a specific tactic. The philosophy is life doesn't hurt you, life helps you, even when it looks like it hurts you. What we're going through is for our good. But a bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul. We're going to come out of this born anew, more reflective, wiser, stronger, faster. Human beings are built to survive. We always have. A tactic is morning routine. That's why I'm such an evangelist around the 5 a.m. Club. It's the greatest time in the day for quietude, but also to get fit, to prime your mindset, to purify your heart set, to elevate your health set, your heart set, your health set, and increase your soul set. So giving yourself that 1 hour where you do the methods to make yourself stronger allows you to go out into the day and feel dramatically different. Your days can be much better by what you do first thing in the morning. So don't just wake up and look at the news or check your email or just start living life. Take that 1 hour, what I call the victory hour, to prepare yourself for a day. Great athlete, as you know, prepares for game. Spartan warrior said, sweat more in training and you'll bleed less in war.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Robin. Definitely. I love just the intentionality behind that. Living a passion life on purpose. There's a process there of honoring the work that allows the rest to be enjoyed. Because otherwise it's just indulgence. It's just gluttony. It's laziness. Without it, being at least somewhat scheduled for the freedom to occur. Robin, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to your next book. Thank you for sharing that you're working on that. I wish you all the best of luck. I'm always here as a friend for you. If you ever want to go over some of those stretches and things like that, happy to share. But Robin, thanks for your brilliance today.
You've got a new friend as well, Connor, and I want to applaud you for not only what you're doing in your professional sports career with New Jersey, but also this podcast and everything I see you putting out on social media. It's great, and I'm going to take you up one day on those stretches I saw in one of those videos. It was like,
Absolutely. Maybe we'll get a chapter in the pilot light.
Get a whole chapter in the pilot light, and send me a copy with the invoice, because I want to pay for one of the first copies.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thanks,
Thank
Connor.
you. Of course. Thank you to all of our listeners today for joining Robin and I. I really appreciated his time. He truly is. I will definitely lean on him as a friend in the future. Truly an exceptional person, and you could just tell he puts the work in to develop himself, and all he walks the walk. And I think that's all we ask of, the leaders of our society, of the people who write the books I read, is I want to be around people who, mean what they say, but they also have a relationship with enacting in their life day to day. They have a real pulse on what it looks and feels like to be your best day in, day out, year in, year out. And I think Robin is a great role model for me that way. 3 sort of, takeaways or focus points that I was going to bring home for myself was, one, it was something I really did well as a kid, in building my hockey career. And it's something I want to do for the next phase of my life, and really for the second half of my professional hockey career, is I want to give myself permission to be an abnormalist. It's a word that Robin made up today, and I really liked it, because you do have to, if you want to do things that are uncommon, you have to give yourself permission to be uncommon. And he was very clear in his relationship of end product and action, and where that starts with inner belief and story. Second, I really have an appreciation for Robin's the way he focuses on his work. You can tell he doesn't bleed work time into family time. He doesn't have his phone out when he's doing some of his deep reading. I mean, you could tell just from how quickly he was able to, recollect quotes and books that were very important to him and who the author was. He clearly puts the work in to really make his progress a part of his being when he's working on his personal self. And then also just the dedication to his family. It's clearly something that he values and schedules and makes time for, and he separates work and play in a way that I think is really wise. And then I think Robin touched on it as well, where he discussed how to love and understand the duality of both your superpower and its dark side. We talk about a lot of it with Michael Jordan and sort of his relationship of how his competitiveness burned so hot. Because that's something I have found in my own career, where I can be hyper competitive. I can be hyper focused on wanting to get better every second of every day. And that was a mantra I always had growing up, was, nothing was ever good enough. And I think if you're consistently that dissatisfied, my superpower to want to be better can burn a little hot and become, destructive at some point. So I was really grateful that those 3 points came so clear to me. I hope that, those 3 resonate with you, our listener. Thanks again for joining us. Instead of our small business shout out today, I did want to highlight, I didn't want to abuse Robin's time. I was really grateful we got to spend, really over a full hour together. I wanted to let you know, if you want to support Robin and his mission, you can find him over at the Robin Sharma Foundation for Children. It's a registered charitable foundation founded by Robin Sharma. The foundation raises funds from around the world and donates them to children's causes for really children in need. You can also follow Robin on Instagram or via his podcast. I consume a lot of his content. He does a really great job. I mean, he's the master at this. He's been doing this for a long time. And so that's, a couple ways you can really support myself today and by supporting our guest Robin, as I really appreciated his time and effort to help make us both better. To end today's podcast, I do want to issue a challenge to our listener. The best we can all do right now is tend to the garden we can touch, and really to support our loved ones, our family, our community, only the way that we know how. So I, for example, know that I'll be ordering this week from Dirty Root. They've been offering a special week in, week out, and they've all been fantastic. I hope that I'm able to get my hands on some before you hear about this, because they've been selling out every week. That's one way. We're going to be delivering coffee to a lot of different firehouses, medical care locations. I want you to vote with your dollar to support local. I want you to, and if maybe not financially, you prefer, you can act in kindness, towards an essential worker or medical care giver in this time. But please hashtag CCPod. I want to see, your brilliance in the world. I want, to witness your growth as a person and leader. And thanks again for listening to the Connor Carrick podcast today. We'll see you next week.